from abroad, Nevis, St. Kitts, London Yard, Florida, Jamaica to everybody locked in for the global view. Reason with the people now, search for the answers somehow. Every Monday we unite, knowledge shining through the night. Rain keep the fire blaze, conversation elevate. Alan lead the dialogue, breaking down the money. Quality time every Monday night. Alan keep the people minds ignite. Live reactions, facts inside. Rain keep the conversation bright. Quality time every Monday night. From the Caribbean to worldwide, I come and share, interact live. Everybody on the stream tonight. Quality time, quality time. Every Monday on the line. Quality time, quality time. Alan bring the facts tonight. Quality time, quality time. Rain keep the future bright. Come and share, subscribe tonight. Yeah. Real Entertainment Network worldwide. Quality time. Every Monday night live. Quality time. Quality time. Quality time. Quality time. Every Monday on the line. I don't bring the facts tonight. So the people read between the lines. Run live. Everybody tune in live. Global topics, deep analysis. Audience interaction every night. I lump on the live stream shop, breaking down the news and the whole affairs part. From the islands to the White House, every headline get dissected right now. No noise, no gimmick talk. Pure facts when Alan start war. Economics, politics too. Caribbean lyrics on the global view.
You know, create them, one load them. Every human, come and stop them. Got them destined.
Reasoning deep till
That is your destiny. I'll be what you ought to be. Even then, no one you reach no way. Reach no way.
pretend. Quality time, so this standard again. Quality time every Monday night.
Reach no way.
All of the people mind you right. Reaction, facts inside. When keep the conversation bright. Quality time every Monday night. From the Caribbean to worldwide. Come and share, interact live. Everybody on the street tonight. Them attacking war and trade. All I'm breaking down.
Bling bling, no me call it.
Stock
Every
market
song
rise
I
and
write,
fall.
every
How really
song I
affect the
write,
small
every
man
song
now.
tell me
When the
something.
leaders make
Am I wrong?
decisions, Alan, watch close with precision.
Believe in myself.
Deep analysis every week, giving
Nobody
voices to the
above
ones who
myself.
see.
Energy,
Audience calling
energy,
from
build your
abroad.
energy.
St.
No
Kitts, London
charity.
Yard,
What the sight
Florida,
to see? What the sight
Jamaica
to
to
see?
everybody
What a
locked in
colossal.
for the global
Working to prosper. What you gonna stop for? Wanna keep on this right on the corner. Hey, make way when I'm weird there. Hey, tell the hater them stay there.
Yeah, it's that time again. May I say good morning, good evening, everybody. You know, sure it's night in the Caribbean and all, but it's still evening here in Florida. 17th August 2026. This is quality time with Alan Boyle. We're gonna get straight into what we're dealing with today. I just have one little observation. I would have come on whenever it was the launch of MP11 Mario Philip, and I would have said that there is some promise, and I was looking forward to see when to hear from him again in depth, and I would have heard from him. Oh, last week I think he did his first interview. He would have done his first interview and kind of giving us a little bit more as far as how he is looking at politics. Would I get to hear more from him? I am not going to go too in depth because he's actually supposed to come on this network at some time in the near future. Uh, the most I will say until that happens is needs to be a massive improvement between now and that particular moment in time. There needs to be a massive improvement between that and this part and this time. We will see, but I was underwhelmed at this. If the first one was show that at the potential, that one you carry it back now so that everything is kind of in the middle. I guess let me leave it at that. But anyway, we kind of got a full slate to deal with today. Let me deal with the oil prices first. Let's go to the reason why oil the oil prices did not get as far out of control as was anticipated. I did tell you that there would be an impact, and thankfully it didn't get as bad as it could have gotten. So we're gonna do a little explainer into why it stayed at manageable levels and oil did not get to $200 a barrel.
Not long after the Strait of Hormuz was closed, at the start of the Middle East war, China went on a crude oil crash diet. Initially, China increased its purchases of crude oil. But around a month after the war started, Beijing switched tack. Between April and June, China cut its crude oil imports by a massive 40%. Crude prices did not spiral, and Beijing's actions acted as a shock absorber for the global economy. China's policy-led adjustments to domestic demand helped keep the market stable and probably averted a global recession. A bold statement that China is an oil fortress capable of reshaping the global order.
The really interesting part is that the main strategy that China deployed was actually managing demand. So, in other words, China reduced the amount of energy going into its actual economy. And there are a couple of different factors here. So part of this is through electrification. And China now puts massive amounts of electric vehicles on the roads. Over half of passenger vehicles sold are now electric, and about a quarter of trucks as well. The second piece was a policy response where China basically banned exports of refined products, including gasoline, jet fuel, diesel. And these are products that are coming from some of the state-owned refineries. So through that, China was basically able to slash the amount that those refineries were running and the amount of oil that they needed. But third, as part of that, China probably also cut the amount of refined products going into its domestic economy.
So we can see that demand destruction was key. China managed demand by putting masses of e-vehicles on the road, banning exports of gasoline and diesel, and cutting the amount of refined products going into its domestic economy. Following the
besides Trinidad and Guyana, the only option available for the other Caribbean islands is to electrify. Been talking a lot about the need for solar. Some islands will have the ability to do geothermal energy, and wind energy is also vital. So you're going to find alternative ways to create power that do not involve the burning of fossil fuels. If your government is not talking about that, your bills will remain high. If people who say they want to be in power are not speaking about these alternative sources of electricity, your bills will remain high, and they are not serious in any of the instances about the cost of living.
Strait's closure in March, China drew down oil from pre-war stockpiles that were double the combined size of US and Japanese stockpiles. In fact, there were more than the US, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and South Korea put together. An oil colossus. The story of how China amassed reserves big enough to change the global energy market is one of patience and ingenuity. Over the years, it became clear that China was consistently importing more oil than it actually refined and consumed when oil prices were low.
I've seen this escalating very massively in the year 2025, when it was clear that by all the numbers globally, there was more oil production than there was oil consumption. And therefore, many analysts expected prices to come under pressure and to fall.
One of the things to note about the Chinese stockpile and how they were able to get this massive stockpile is that throughout the years, even if you're counting the war in Ukraine, the price of oil has been historically low in comparison to what it has been. At the start of the Iran war, the price of oil was like about $68 a barrel. So it is kind of interesting the governments who were not able to pay their bills when the price of oil was historically low. And I call no name. But like what Gaston said, you know who you are.
Much more than they actually did. And the question was, why did prices not come down much more massively if there's such an excess supply globally? And where did these barrels go? Where was the missing oil? And the answer was it was imported into China and put into storage.
Every time crude oil prices approached around $60 per barrel, China would be big buyers in the market. China's but the world's largest net oil importer and the country with the largest domestic storage in oil. That gives China incredible influence on the market, comparable to what producers like Saudi Arabia used to have.
Since the Iran war started in the second quarter of 2026, they have become much smaller importer than they used to be because they draw down on the strategic reserves. So that's the way they use them. Going forward, of course, the implication is that you can do all sorts of things with such a powerful position.
So now, spread across China, there are big tank farms, conventional tank farms in particular, in areas where along the coast where the refineries are. Increasingly, they're also stored in caverns. The scale of the slowdown in demand, which caught many traders and analysts off guard, turned out to be a critical factor that allowed the global economy to absorb the loss of over 13 million barrels per day of Middle Eastern exports.
So the moral of the story from the first part of the video is that essentially China left the chat when it comes to oil. They reduced the amount of oil that they were importing, and since they are the biggest importer of oil throughout the world, that major market off the table meant that the price of oil did not increase as fast and as high as anticipated before. It must also be said that the United States coordinated with its partners as well to draw down on their reserves. And the US reserves, I think, right now are at a historic low. So that also played a factor. But the major factor was the PRC. Now we're going to get more in-depth into renewables.
China's Communist Party leadership went through the gears. Policymakers tapped China's vast domestic reserves of coal and natural gas. They encouraged the use of renewables, where the country is less reliant on imports. And China took advantage of its giant fleet of electric vehicles. EV charging increased a lot more than the number of EVs in China. Companies and drivers simply started to rely more on electric vehicles. Despite much lower gasoline consumption, traffic congestion remained relatively stable.
Of course, a lot of the dramatic reduction of about 50% comes from drawing down stockpiles. But there is now evidence that reductions in transport oil consumption are also playing a significant part. So the sales of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel fell by well over 10% in the second quarter of the year, which makes a major contribution. The factors that are enabling that are electric vehicles, public transportation, such as high-speed rail and urban rail, but also a lot of behavioral change.
Now let's take a look at
Just a little addition here. When it comes to building out these, governments tend to use the phrase and say they are building industries. It is not enough, for example, to do solar panels by just saying we are gonna provide incentives to the people. If you bring in a solar panel, you get it duty free. That is not quite enough. It is something, don't get me wrong, but you also need to make sure that we have people who are able to maintain these solar panels. I guess you would call them technicians, engineers, um, whatever it is. But these people who are able to maintain the equipment become very important. Same thing if there is going to be an EV boom in the islands, that would require for there to be charging ports. And the difference between charging at a charging port and charging at home, you might take 8 hours, 6 hours to fully charge your vehicle at home. So essentially, it's an overnight circumstance. Whereas if you have one of them charging ports set up with a fast charger, half an hour, your vehicle is good to go. And so this is why the infrastructure has to match the policy. So you got to know, make sure that people are, as I said, trained to install the equipment, to maintain the equipment, and then you also have to have the infrastructure in place, hardware, so that the people could benefit in that way as well. And when you combine these two things, now you have an industry.
electricity generation. China is the world's largest coal consumer. 54% of its energy to generate electricity came from coal last year. But this figure fell below half this year for the first time, and it's a lot less than 2011 when it was 80%. And renewable energy share topped 40% for the first time, while wind and solar was also strong. To understand why China's doing all of this, you need to understand the ruling Communist Party. Now, China is by far the world's largest energy consumer. The Chinese economic growth model relies heavily on exports. This puts enormous pressure on the ruling Communist Party to keep the machines running in the manufacturing sector. So securing energy supply is a top priority for the party.
A hugely political question. And I think, one of the factors that's often misunderstood is that a huge part of China's decarbonization drive and their climate strategy is really about energy security. And of course, this is because China is a net importer of fossil fuels, especially oil and gas, and there aren't significant domestic reserves of these fuels. So that's been a huge reason why China started investing in renewables early on.
Recent months have shown that China is far more in control of its oil consumption than previously thought. China is explicitly aiming for long-term energy self-sufficiency to insulate its economy from global market volatility and geopolitical shocks. According to data from the China National Petroleum Corporation, the country's domestic energy self-sufficiency rate is expected to reach 85% this year. Goldman Sachs forecasts that China will achieve full energy self-sufficiency by 2060, but it's not there yet.
China does have a degree of self-sufficiency, both because of the large clean energy sector and because of domestic coal and oil and gas production, but it remains highly reliant on imports for oil, especially.
As I have mentioned previously, China is always heading in a general direction. This is why they have 5-year plans. And they will tell you for this next 5 years, this is what we plan to do. And they build upon it and they build upon it until they get to self-sufficiency or whatever goal they have in mind. Goals have been things like they want to start off at the bottom of the manufacturing chain and they want to move up slowly, increasingly. So I remember in the 90s when people used to laugh after things and say made in China. And now made in China is real quality material. So the goal is not to get to this one place. The goal is to build over time, consistently, brick by brick, until you in the place that you want to be. And then thereafter, you maintain.
And that's why it has made this investment in stockpiling.
As far as its strengths go, China leads the world in producing critical minerals that are central to its energy security. And heavy investments in its energy grid are enabling China to prepare for a future powered by renewables. Also, the country's abundant supply of coal offers policymakers a safety net in the event of major disruptions to other energy sources. On the 1st of January 2025, China introduced an energy law that for the first time requires state-owned and private companies to establish strategic reserves of crude oil. It set the groundwork for a more coordinated stockpiling effort, and reserves began to swell quickly. Another major driver boosting oil security is China's need to hedge against sanctions. In a world where the US is levying sanctions and tariffs constantly, it seems like a prudent move. Before the Iran war, China bought at least 20% of its oil from countries under US sanctions, chiefly Iran, Russia, and Venezuela. That figure is probably considerably higher as there is no official data on Russian oil imports, and many Iranian and Venezuelan barrels that arrive in China are rebranded as Malaysian. In 2025, China imported well over twice as much crude oil branded as Malaysian than Malaysia produces.
It is also, I think, a big motivator to blunt the sanctions weapon, which caused China to ratchet up its reserve so much, especially in the year 2025, in the very recent past, when it became clear that sanctions would multiply and that it has become an instrument of policy. I mean, this is unthinkable 10 years ago, the way in which sanctions are now handed out by the US government. And it's not surprising that other countries will react to that. And in China's situation, the most straightforward and prudent action they could take is to insulate themselves from the direct effect of sanctions. If you calculate the strategic reserve in China, it probably means that they have easily 150 days or more forward cover.
The Iran war has exposed how much of China's oil demand has been driven by stockpiling rather than consumption, while inventory buying could return as Middle Eastern supplies.
One of the reasons to pay attention to how they have approached sanctions. If you don't feel like it could happen to you in the Caribbean, look at the island of Cuba and tell me you ain't concerned about what a oil blockade can do to your country. So it's a very important thing to consider, and the self-reliance that you could get and the confidence you could get to be able to not be exposed to the volatility of the oil market. I don't feel like, it's just priceless to have that peace of mind. Ultimately.
Cover. Analysts reckon that demand lost to electrification is unlikely to come back, potentially leaving China less able to absorb surplus barrels.
So what does that mean for global oil markets? It could mean that oil prices eventually have a lower floor. There's a much smaller market that OPEC is gearing toward, and so will impact their behavior. Of course, implications for the China-Russia relationship, because Russia is so dependent in terms of exports to the China market. So lots of unanswered questions there, but certainly, a huge factor. I would say, in addition to that, if you're looking at China domestically, again, some of the recent plans reveal their strategy. So, I think we'll expect China to continue electrifying and also continuing to invest in some of these domestic production bases. At the same time, they're also investing in basically turning coal into liquid fuels. This is something that if those investments come online and ramp up significantly, it could have massive implications for climate because it's a very emissions intensive process basically to turn coal into synthetic fuels that replace oil and gas.
So when we think of Beijing's oil fortress, are we seeing a reshaping of the global order? For some, it's a chiseling away at the existing global situation as countries move to ensure stability in areas where the US has withdrawn. What does seem clear is that China is unlikely to go back to the way things were. We've witnessed demand destruction, the permanent loss of fossil fuel consumption driven by the oil colossus's rapid structural shift towards green technology and electrification.
This year has been a year of heat waves, wildfires, and extreme weather across the globe.
This is another climate and El Nino video. I've been speaking to you about how this is gonna affect the Caribbean. I hope people have been taking it seriously. If you haven't, I mean, who feels it knows it, eh? So, but you could actually actively see it playing out in the Caribbean right now. As far as I'm aware, the Leeward Islands are in a major drought, and the Leeward Islands traditionally gets less rain than the Windward Islands. Whereas, I mean, if you're watching the CPL, if you're paying attention to what's going on in Barbados, Barbados a flood, full of water down there, but up top in the middle, it is very, very dry. So this is another video about climate change and super El Nino and the impacts they are going to have on the globe, really.
It's not the hottest year on record so far, that was 2024. But climate scientists say 2026 could still take that ominous title. That's because it's an El Nino year. Some have even called it a super El Nino year. We'll get into that in a second. First, we asked Zach Labe, a researcher at Climate Central, what climate forecasters mean by El Nino.
So what that refers to is it's this oscillation of ocean waters, the temperature of ocean waters in the central tropical Pacific Ocean.
Okay, that sounds a bit dry, but an El Nino is anything but. He's talking about an irregular warming of the waters here in the Pacific Ocean. That's extra heat that can turbocharge global weather, making the extremes even more extreme.
And so what El Nino does is it can add a temporary boost to those temperatures to make them even warmer than they would be.
Warmer waters doesn't sound too bad at first glance, but the data shows this is the longest stretch of consistently high ocean temperatures since records began. And that's threatening to tip the delicate climate balance we depend on.
These extreme temperatures in the ocean are affecting many basins. In terms of marine heat waves we're seeing across parts of off the coast of Western Europe, stretching across much of the Pacific Ocean, across parts of the other parts of the Atlantic. So this year in particular, I think the ocean warmth is a really key story. And as El Nino starts to unfold more and more, and we're already seeing it quite impressive, I think the story about the ocean's impacts will continue to be a top climate story for the rest of this year.
But what does that mean in concrete terms? What's the connection between ocean temperatures and extreme weather?
There's a couple different ways that the ocean temperatures affect extreme weather. One can actually be a local effect, and what that means is for coastal communities. So you can have really warm ocean temperatures right off the coast. And for areas along the shore, that can actually boost humidity levels. So that can increase heat stress during the day.
Do you think a lot of what we are seeing in terms of the weather is totally natural, or you think that there is some form of man interference that may have some implications we are not zooming in on? That has been what people have been warning about. I think by man made interference, you are referring to additional inputs into the ear. However, if you just leave it just to how much carbon dioxide we are emitting into the atmosphere, that is when you jump in your vehicle and you drive your vehicle, do not feel like you are not contributing to the problem. I would assume that your vehicle is consuming gasoline I would assume that you charge up your phone and do all kind and all these type of thing. You think like do you think things like cloud seeding in places like Dubai? I I am skeptical of such. I was trying to. i- if you look at the emissions right now, for example, of just in the war in Iran, the emissions from fighter jets, the emissions from all of these missiles flying back and forth, the emissions from the carriers, the emissions from the destroyers. This is what I'm saying by without having to consider all of these cloud seeding and all of these things, man is playing a major role in what is taking place at the moment. Man is digging up. If you look at even digging oil wells down in Guyana and all these type of things, this is what I mean. So I don't necessarily have to go the route of the cloud seeding and all of these other things. I'm speaking about the emissions that man does definitely contribute towards. I think that you are suggesting, as I say, other more complicated, more nefarious means of affecting the climate. I am uncertain of such, and so therefore I kind of step to the side because, as I said, with the information that we have already, we could already see that man definitely has played a huge role. When you jump up on a plane, when you jump up on a boat, all of these things are putting emissions into the environment. So that's what I mean.
And that can also lead to warmer nights. So when you have these higher humidity conditions associated with those warmer ocean waters, the temperature doesn't drop as much at night. And during potential areas of extreme heat, that can be really dangerous because our body often relies on temperatures to cool down at night so we can rest, and there can be reduced heat stress. So this tendency for warmer nights is very much a heat health hazard.
But it's not just the physical stress of hot nights and hotter days that has observers worried. The excess heat is creating so-called heat domes. And if you've seen the horrendous fires that have been lashing southern Europe this year, you know the damage a heat dome is capable of inflicting.
Warmer ocean waters can also affect changes in extreme weather patterns, so it can reinforce certain types of weather patterns to occur, like those heat domes. This is more of a new area of research that we're trying to understand the linkages between these warmer ocean waters and how that might affect these types of really persistent weather patterns like we've been seeing during the summer. And that can be particularly dangerous if you have a hurricane that's approaching land, it goes over these warmer ocean waters. And when the conditions in the environment are favorable, then it can really intensify even faster right before landfall, giving communities less time to prepare.
The already record-breaking warm waters of the world's oceans are likely to get supercharged by this year's El Nino, which only really kicks in the winter. But the strange thing about this climate event is that it brings different extreme weather to different parts of the globe.
Some of these linkages that are a bit more...
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna try to learn a little bit more, but this is what I get from my initial search on this cloud seeding matter. Cloud seeding in Dubai and the broader UAE does not change the regional or global climate. It has a very small, localized effect on precipitation, boosting annual rainfall by an estimated 5 to 10% to help counter water scarcity. It cannot create clouds or weather systems out of nothing. So see that's what I found on a preliminary search. I will endeavor to learn more, but I was trying to stick within the realms of what I do know. What are the reasons you feel why we as a small population like navies have not embarked on a promotion to go strictly EV and slowly phase out fossil fuel cars and vehicles. We could be a model island. I feel like we like to be a model island when we're talking about CBI and all that kind of thing there. I am uncertain why. I think that there is a tremendous potential to create new jobs, to train people, to retrain people into different things. I think that there is tremendous potential to bring down, as I said, the cost of living. When you have an EV, the maintenance, for example, you don't have to do any oil changes. So when you're thinking about the service requirements and the cost of service, that is not there. I think that we have become comfortable, and this is why I try to resist when people tell me, "Well, that's how things be," and I try to encourage people to, well, let's think about a better future. Let's think about a new future. So, um, I try as much as possible to encourage people, as I said, to think about new futures, new possibilities, try to spark people to go in a different direction. And I think that it's all about really and truly appealing to politicians and to show them that there is going to be a benefit for you. I made a post this week in a scene let nobody see, but very often politicians know what is required. It's just that they don't know how to do it and get reelected sometimes. So how I try to appeal to them is to show them that if you embark upon this particular policy, it is gonna be good for you at the polling station. When you tell them that, they start to listen to you a little bit more, in my experience.
Clear between El Nino and regional climate. One of those is across the western United States, where there's a tendency during El Nino years for wetter than average conditions, and sometimes in years that can actually lead to flooding in parts of like California and up into Oregon due to atmospheric rivers. Other connections we'll be keeping an eye on is over the Amazon and potentially more drought conditions that are favorable during certain El Nino years. Other areas include Southeast Asia. That's a region that has a tendency for more heat extremes and especially drier than average conditions. So that can lead to areas of drought or more potential for wildfires to grow. So these are just a few of the linkages that El Nino has the tendency to more affect those regions. But again, every El Nino is different, and every El Nino has its own sort of character and intensity associated with it. So we will have to wait and see what this year has to unfold.
And of course, there's the most extreme consequence of the climate crisis, the wildfires that are raging from Canada to France, Spain, Greece, and even Siberia.
We're definitely seeing conditions become more prevalent for wildfire growth. When those wildfires ignite, that means that the environmental conditions are even more favorable for it to become more intense or more spread into larger areas. And it's really part of this idea that
As I said, as they're talking about wildfire, I saw a video of DJ Marisha down at Indian Castle, and the level of dry that there is right now in the Federation. I hope that people are being informed about the dangers of forest fires, and I hope that the fire trucks are doing drills and are prepared to move in the event that there are forest fires that spark up, especially that spark up in hard to reach areas. This is just a hope.
It's a warming world. The the atmosphere can hold more moisture. And so what that does to this land surface is that tries to pull all of that moisture out of like the soils and vegetation and crops into the atmosphere. So that leads to an enhanced drying of the vegetation, of the soils. That combined with some of these extreme heat conditions, the dryness, the hot temperatures, all make those wildfire conditions, the fire weather as we call it, more favorable for growth. And it's really part of this long-term trend. One of these factors, especially in areas that have this long-term trend towards less precipitation, are more likely to see the conditions be favorable for wildfires going forward into the future in a warmer world.
So is 2026 going to break the record for the hottest year ever?
2026 is going to be close, and I can't give an answer today whether it's going to break the new global temperature record, but it's certainly going to rank within the top 5 and maybe top 3 warmest years on record. And for me as a climate scientist, I'm really interested in that long-term trend, which is due to, again, human-caused climate change. And so this year will rank very high and very consistent with that trend. I think what's a bit more clear is actually looking into 2027. So there's a tendency for El Nino's connection to global temperature to be even stronger and more clear sort of several months later. So especially getting into late 2026 into early 2027 is where we're really going to likely see global temperatures rise even more due to that extra boost from El Nino. So I think 2027 has a higher chance of breaking the new all-time warmest year on record.
What's clear is the world is growing warmer, year by year, and science points the finger at man-made climate change. But with humans pumping an estimated 100 million metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every day, I asked Zach Labe if he has any hope we can avert catastrophe.
I think we're definitely seeing signs for optimism that there have been steps taken place to reduce overall global carbon emissions are lower than we might have expected otherwise had we not taken these steps to renewable energy. And I think looking at just the growing prevalence of solutions from wind, from solar, and other solutions are really showing strong steps that there are some actions being taken place around the world, and especially at the local level. I really encourage people to look at all the steps that are going on in their community. How can they get involved? How can they learn more about local community action towards climate resilience and climate solutions? And I think there's many optimistic and really wonderful stories happening at that local level.
Some activists have put it this way: 2026 might be the hottest year on record, but it might also be the coolest year we'll experience for the rest of our lives. That is, unless we finally do something to reverse climate change for good. I'm Almian Isif in Berlin. Thanks for watching.
What he just said supposed to be chilling. Imagine if this year is the coolest year for the rest of your life. And my God, it has been hot. For instance, about March, I've been saying this is not normal. And they are not incorrect in what they're saying. I have been told that next year is for sure gonna be hotter than this year. So something gotta be done. Has to. Otherwise, we may be collectively done. Now, this next story is from a guy with a Hitler mustache. We know him as Gaston Brown. And Mr. Brown, he has a tendency to say erratic stuff. So we're gonna go through the story here. He and the OACS judges. Guy thought, I would like to hear I would like to know if you hear what I'm hearing from Mr. Brown. But let's take it away.
And we want to say that we are interfering in the judiciary? No, we're trying to protect our country. So this particular judge, who has a propensity to give criminals a break, brother man, if you can't follow the lead of the parliament to give longer sentences, leave our country voluntarily, otherwise they're going to deport you, make you persona non grata. You know who you are. It's the Prime Minister of the country saying this.
No, maybe, he was so short, I'm going to play it again. It's only like 30 seconds. So listen once again to Mr. Gaston Brown. He has an issue with the length of sentences being given to persons for certain crimes. And so he's saying that, and just like I was saying, you know who you are. If you can't follow the lead, he said, of the legislature, of the executive, then either leave the country voluntarily or you may be deported. And you hear what he said at the end? And the Prime Minister says so.
And we want to say that we are interfering in the judiciary? No, we're trying to protect our country. So this particular judge who has a propensity to give criminals a break, brother man, if you can't follow the lead of the parliament to give longer sentences, leave our country voluntarily, otherwise they're going to deport you, make you persona non grata. You know who you are. It's the Prime Minister of the country saying this.
Okay. No, he walked that back. He walked that back. He ate his words. He swallowed his own vomit shortly after that. But at that particular moment, the Hitler mustache was too much for him. He was feeling himself. And he just let it be known. No, there is really and truly supposed to be a separation of powers. And the Caribbean does not abide by separation of powers in that the executive is also the legislature, so that is already a problem. The executive are also the one who makes the laws. And he's saying that, you know, the judiciary, the INA really need to think for yourself. We don't do the thinking for you. So just give the people and them longer sentences. See, I don't write it down in my book here, so you don't have to worry about any uniformity, about the fact that there is the Eastern Caribbean judges in other islands, and that there has to be some kind of conformity in sentences. Don't worry about that. I, Gaston Brown, don't let you know. You could do what you got to do. In response to this, there was a joint statement by the heads of judiciary. So I'm gonna read this joint statement by the heads of the judiciary. The Caribbean heads of judiciary note with deep and unsettling concern the recent attack on the judiciary through remarks made to the media by the Honorable Gaston Brown, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, on 10th August 2026. Apparently dissatisfied with what he regards as lenient sentences being ordered in criminal matters before the court, the Prime Minister referenced, without naming a particular judge whom he considers has a propensity to give criminals a break. The Honorable Prime Minister ventured further in his statement to suggest that if the judge is unable to follow the lead of Parliament to give longer sentences, he should leave the country voluntarily or be deported and made persona non grata. And listen, when you hear about persona non grata, that they like a John Wick, it look like he been a watch John Wick too. Is that so? Is a combination of the Hitler mustache, and he watched the John Wick when John Wick been around from the world, and he was like, "But we're gonna make you persona non grata. You can't come back in the Continental no more. Cause you kill people from Continental, you refuse. However, you just ain't do what me want you to. So you ain't gonna be able to come back in Antigua. What Dudley ain't for you. Them kind of settings. We strongly condemn these unfortunate remarks made by the Honorable Gaston Brown against the judge and by extension the judiciary of the Eastern Caribbean region. Cause you better believe the judge on them like a police. If you attack one, you better know you will be attacking all of them. Interesting point you highlighted there in relation to how our governments function. You are saying our executive is also the legislative arm. So there is no separation of the three arms of government. That is precisely. Oh. VMix. Yeah, well, update and no update. Laptop on the way you go do. But I was reading, I was saying, interesting point you highlighted there in relation to how our governments function. You are saying that our executive is also the legislative arm. So there is no true separation of the three arms of government. That is precisely what I am saying, sir. And to give you an example of this, as many problems as people have with the United States of America, it is a true separation of powers. So, for example, the president of the United States is not the one making the laws. This is a task that is given to the House of Representatives and the senators. Now, the president could veto on them type of situations, but the president is serving an executive function. So it's not like they're going to Capitol Hill to argue this, and that. They will try to, convince senators and House representatives to pass a law, but ultimately, they are not the legislature. Whereas in the Caribbean, when you vote for these people, they are legislature and executive at the same time. Even in the larger countries, which is shocking to me, they are all of it and more at the same time. Hold me, go. Let me pull up this next video here from Gaston. Because Gaston didn't give a response to the he gave a response to the judiciary. That was when he walked it back. Wait. Okay, give me a second. Give me a second. Thought I done had Gaston response in here, but I did not. Okay, I'm gonna have to come back to Gaston. I made a slight error, but we're gonna stick in the legal field. We're gonna go to the CCJ, because that is also an interesting thing. So we're gonna come right back to Gaston shortly.
is it fair to demand a public official resign from their office over mere allegations? We're still talking about the CCJ scandal involving the president, Justice Winston Anderson, who has come under attack by other judges from the court, by the same people he sits at a table with. And if you want some names, I'm talking about Justice Chile Ibo Usuji and Justice Peter Jamadar. Those two specific justices or judges have made some scathing statements that raised questions about the CCJ's administration under President Winston Anderson. As per an article published by the Trinidad Express on Sunday on August 9, 2026, several judges raised questions about Anderson's administration of the Caribbean Court of Justice. The article was published after several emails were leaked. Emails between Justice Anderson and several of the justices at the CCJ. We're not sure how those emails got to the Trinidad Express, but in summary, the emails are interpreted as making allegations against Justice Winston Anderson. Those allegations suggest mismanagement and misconduct by Justice Anderson. What's even more shocking is that the Mohammed's bias appeal case came up in the email exchanges that were leaked to the public. Now we see everyone and their mother is calling for Anderson to resign. So far, one Guyanese opposition party has demanded that Justice Anderson resign, following the publication of those compromised emails by the Trinidad Express newspaper. Anderson is the sitting president of the CCJ. This court serves as the final stop for cases being appealed by...
Okay, so one of the great hopes that I have in the fact that these emails were leaked to a Trinidad and Tobago newspaper. And this is why I am naive in certain respects with regards to politics. Some of the schemes that I hear that politicians are involved with would have to be so amazing that everybody has to be involved in the crime. Let me give you an example. When Dr. Jogon tell you that whether it's Len Harris or Timothy Harris walking out a development bank with hundreds of thousands of dollars in a paper bag, it has to be unbelievable, which is why you don't hear anything about it anymore. For Dr. Harris or his brother, whoever, anybody, for them to send a messenger in there and be getting out hundreds of thousands of dollars, then y'all need to understand, you know, this can't be something where you're going to just keep under wraps, you know. You got to got multiple people around the place who know what going on, security guard and all them kind of thing they're going to know what going on. Listen, people who are sweet garbage, you're going to know what going on. And if them know what going on, they need a cut too. And my great hope when it come to when people just tell me about how all these unbelievable things just be going on in Zingis and news, this story gonna leak. Everybody within this scheme ain't gonna be wicked because everybody ain't gonna get a cut. Even if they talk just because they ain't get a cut, somebody gonna talk. And they are genuinely good people. Imagine me got to say me naive for believing that they are good people in the society. What if they see them kind of craziness there, they are gonna tell somebody. They will tell me, at least. Because remember, no, I tell you, if politician can go tell me something going on, if somebody, you know, tell me something going on and they say, you know, they don't even go tell me, keep it confidential. But if somebody can go tell me that a politician greasy, slimy like a the greasy pole, In them circumstances, now I gonna have the ability to go investigate. And if the investigation show that they're slimy and they're greasy for true, we're gonna hang them up. We're gonna fry them. We're gonna cook them. You better believe that part there's so. And well, I'm not even gonna get into that part of the thing there, but we gonna reach there.
Persons
CCJ.
or entities from any of the countries that have agreed for the CCJ to be its final court of appeal. Guyana is one of those countries that sees the CCJ as its final court of appeal. But now, Justice Anderson is at the center of a scandal after several emails were leaked to the public, which is why Guyana is caught up in this situation. Because once there are allegations that this court is compromised, it could make those countries that are signed on to the CCJ think twice. It could cause those countries to pull out of the CCJ. Of course, these are just allegations, but we all know that allegations can leave a stain, even after someone has been proven innocent. The person's reputation can be tarnished forever. With regards to Guyana, we heard from Aubrey Norton, who is the leader of the PNCR-APNU opposition. We also heard from Member of Parliament Terence Campbell, who has been very vocal about this scandal. He has even taken it a step further, calling for Anderson to step down from office amid these allegations, including an allegation that Anderson interferes in the outcomes of appeal cases that were brought before the court. I haven't seen similar sentiments from the main opposition party led by Azzuddin Mohammed. Mohammed is heavily invested in this situation, especially since his case was just recently dismissed by the CCJ, and especially since one of the justices whose name is mentioned in those leaked emails mentioned the Mohammed's appeal case. Justice Peter Jamadar, to be specific, mentioned the Mohammed's case in the same email where he suggested that there were some type of impropriety on the part of the president of the CCJ, Justice Anderson. Also, Justice Chile Ibo Usuji is aligned with some of the concerns raised by Justice Jamadar as well as other justices named in the emails. Now, there isn't any clear statement in those leaked emails that says that Justice Anderson actually wanted the Mohammed's case to be dismissed when the law did not support that decision. That isn't what's being said in those emails. But I see individuals reading a lot more than there is into those emails. We've got to be careful here because we're talking about people's reputation. We also understand how the Mohammeds could be concerned because they are in an extradition proceedings. If the extradition proceeding isn't dismissed, then the Mohammeds are going to be in some deep shit. Because the U.S. wants to prosecute Azzuddin Mohammed and his father, Nizar Mohammed, for a list of alleged crimes. Not only that, they face a maximum of 20 years in prison for each count if they're found guilty. So there is a lot at stake, and therefore the CCJ cannot be caught up in a scandal like this because it raises questions about the integrity of the court, and more specifically, the integrity of the CCJ's president, Winston Anderson. I'm going to say again, these are just allegations. Anyone can say anything crazy about me or about you. Does it mean it's a fact? So what I'm saying is these allegations about Justice Winston Anderson.
I just want to say something with this allegations thing, because I had to explain this. And I'm certain the person who I told said, 2 minutes all attack. Go ahead. You are not allowed to say something is an allegation and feel like that is going to save you from defamation. Remember, I'm going to repeat it. Just because you say allegedly, according to the school children and them, a certain story go, that will not save you from a defamation lawsuit. That is not how the law works. Okay.
May need to be investigated so that we can get to the bottom of what's really transpiring at the CCJ. This is way beyond Justice Winston Anderson. Anderson does not run the CCJ in isolation of the other justices. So Mohammed is very invested in this scandal because his name came up. His case came up, the case that was dismissed under Justice Anderson's watch. In fact, Mohammed did not hesitate to express his views on the revelations of the emails. Almost immediately after the Trinidad Express dropped that bombshell article, Mohammed published a statement calling for accountability from the court's leadership. He said several things, including this, quote, "The CCJ is Guyana's final appellate court. Public confidence in that institution depends fundamentally upon the independence of every judge, the integrity of judicial deliberations, and the absolute assurance that no judge, regardless of position or seniority, can improperly influence the judicial opinions of another." End quote. So as soon as this article dropped, we started to get these self-righteous statements from everybody and their mother, their aunties, their uncles. You get the drift. Permit me to say this in Guyanese dialect. It's only when they shoot up on the other foot, people understand what allegation mean. Azruddin Mohammed should know this before asserting that he believes the allegations that Justice Anderson supposedly coerces other judges to decide an appeal case a certain way. Like I said, the Mohammed's appeal case was just dismissed by the CCJ, much to their disappointment. In the Mohammeds' minds, they had to win this case because so much was riding on this case being tossed out. And I mean tossed out in favor of the Mohammeds. Nobody wants to get extradited to the US, but here we are, calling for the resignation of the CCJ president, Winston Anderson. When we do not have all sides to the story, all we have are bits and pieces of leaked emails. Emails that were leaked. Emails that were leaked to do exactly what they're doing, calling into question the reputation of the president of the court. In the emails, it seems as if Justice Peter Jamadar felt as if Justice Anderson was steering him and the other judges towards dismissing the Mohammed's case, which the court unanimously dismissed as announced on July 29, 2026. The said leaked emails also suggest that Justice Chile Ibo Usuji also has some disenchantment over how Justice Anderson is executing his duties as president of the court. But let's get back to the allegations, which could have been intentionally leaked to do what it's doing. Call into question the integrity of the head of the CCJ. At worst,
Feel like we're going over and over, and we got a full slate. We still got to deal with the shadow cabinet. We still got to get back to Gaston Brown, and we still got to get my goat, the Honorable Mark Manley. So my two final points are these. I've been speaking about the need for institutions to regain their integrity. If people lose faith in the fact that your institution is legitimate, they will start to take, they're going to start to take the lie in their hand. So that is a very important thing. Second thing that I've been trying to stress on the media, particularly the media in Singleton News, is y'all need to get off your asses, man, and do your job. You know what I'm saying? When my partner called me in the middle of the night and said, "Boy, Alan, I watch some construction going on. No, that man, I build a dialysis machine, you know, so in the middle of the night and not tell nobody nothing. It is your responsibility to go on the scene. I can't do it. You know, Florida. I better do it. Better believe that. But it's your responsibility to go down there now, gather the information, and don't just print it. What you need to do is you need to approach the authorities and say, "Hey, Mr. Premier," you go to Janelle Nisbet and you say, "Hey, I have information. I'm gonna be running a story about the dialysis machine. Do you have any comment?" If they don't have a comment, all right, you run your story without their comment. If they have a comment, then you run your story with their comment. But regardless to what, you run your story and you get your eyeballs and you build up your reputation and you bring the truth to the people. That is your job. Same circumstance when Miss Lawrence asked the premier in a public meeting, hey, I'm hearing there's gonna be a development over there. What your responsibility is as the media is to start to gather up and find out, hey, who are the landowners? You go to them, you start to talk to them. You say, hey, have you been approached to sell your land over here? Have you been approached to sell your land over here? You gather up your information once again, and then you don't just print it. You yourself go to the and you say, hey, I am gonna do a story, and this is what is gonna be in the story. No, you ain't gonna stop the story. Do you have a comment? If they don't have a comment, you put out the story. If they do have a comment, you put out your story. Your job is not to go to these premier press conferences and PM round tables and all these kind of things and laugh up with them and say he and them get, no, that's not your job. Whether or not you're good with them is not the point of the matter. The point of the matter is you trade is information and intel. You got intel. You got intel, you got leverage. They will want to speak to you. They're going to request you if that is the case. And the public going to protect you if that is the case. Yeah, so we're really going to get back to Justice Anderson. Justice Anderson going to go to see for himself. I have more to read from the heads of government statement. So they went on to say, we strongly condemn these unfortunate remarks made by Honorable Gaston Brown against the judge and by extension the judiciary of the Eastern Caribbean region. Not only are such statements regrettable, but they are a threat to the independence of the judiciary. They have the potential to erode and weaken the efficacy of the doctrine of separation of powers, which is the very bedrock upon which democratic governance rests. Mutual respect for the constitutional boundaries between the three co-equal arms of the state, judiciary, the executive, and the legislature, is an indispensable necessity for the effective and just preservation of the rule of law and the integrity of our democratic institutions. For this reason, the heads of judiciary denounced the Prime Minister's remarks as unproductive and dangerous, bearing only the potential to undermine public confidence in the administration of justice. Everything might be a say. And listen, Gaston Brown is a banker. Eh? Gaston Brown is a banker. He ain't on board the law. I wish he had approached this thing by going to his AG, like going to somebody who actually knows. Antigua has numerous talented attorneys he could have got to and get a proper perspective before putting his foot in his mouth, as he is prone to do, before allowing the Hitler mustache to take over and to transform him. Anyway, should the Honorable Prime Minister form the view that the sentences are unduly lenient, there is a well-established mechanism to address this issue. That is by providing a right of appeal to the prosecution to the Court of Appeal and to the apex court, which is either the Caribbean Court of Justice or the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. Or this is another issue in Antigua. In Antigua, if you beat the case in the High Court, the prosecution can appeal it. So that's one thing about Antigua. He ain't talking about that, and that is within his powers to say, like, let me step this up. He ain't want to talk about that. This is the only lawful and legitimate manner consistent with the rule of law and the separation of powers for the issue to be resolved. We acknowledge robust public discussions and legitimate criticisms as healthy and important features of a democratic society. However, these criticisms must be grounded in respect and directed toward constructive and collaborative engagement. Despite these unfortunate events, the judiciary will continue to hold firm to its constitutional mandate to discharge its functions impartially, independently, and without fear or favor. And in case you ain't no judges, that was full of legal bad word. Not legal bad word in that. But he's a banker, so he might not know the depths of the word, and then maybe he just get another statement. Anyway, Gaston Brown is not one to lay down and take it, so of course he doubled down. So let me hear what Gaston had to say in response to this.
The Prime Minister begins his response by reaffirming what he calls, without qualification, the importance of an independent and impartial judiciary. But he argues judicial independence does not place court decisions or the administration of justice beyond reasoned public criticism. The Prime Minister says his August 10 remarks were not executive instructions against a judge, but
one thing to note, if somebody tell you, I apologize, and then they say, but everything what they say before the but, ain't go. You ain't gonna believe me. But just check it out. Next time you get an apology.
rather a last resort warning aimed at getting the attention of the judicial hierarchy over sentences he considers too lenient. And seeking to draw a line between the warning and actual government action, he says there has never been any request or action by my government to remove or reassign or deport any member of the judiciary.
And this is where the walking back is. You hear him now, there has never been a movie. Nobody said that there's been a movie. You said that if them not get in line, there will be that same action taken. You're going to deport them and you're going to make them persona non grata. You start to talk Latin and all. Well, John Wick settings.
Prime Minister Brown adds questions involving the tenure, assignment, or conduct of a judicial officer are governed by the Constitution and the law, and says those arrangements will be respected. But that, he makes clear, does not mean he's backing away from the substance of his complaint. As he puts it, that clarification neither withdraws nor dilutes my criticism of sentencing outcomes and institutional performance.
This is a man who cannot accept by a wrong. Should not, that's the way be say. These statements that I'm making now are more reasonable. He's the prime minister of our goddamn country. He could have fled to St. Lucia. He could have communicated directly with the Chief Justice, and all of that really wasn't necessary. He could have trusted. Listen, the Antigua legislature must have been attorneys right now, and they are talented. Them got sense. He must have been able to call them and say, hey, let me get a conversation. This thing confusing me. How can I go about getting to the outcome that I am trying to secure? And this is where I must say, I see my partner make an observation with regards to this, and he said that this is just an attempt to put up a small screen. And I believe that's the only thing that makes sense.
The Prime Minister also takes issue with the heads of judiciary over what he says is their position that an appeal is the only lawful and legitimate way to address an unduly lenient sentence. Prime Minister Brown argues an appeal is the proper way to challenge or correct the sentence in an individual case, and acknowledges that the decision to appeal rests with the constitutionally independent Director of Public Prosecutions. But he argues one appeal cannot answer wider questions about sentencing patterns, repeat offending, delays, rehabilitation, and coordination across the criminal justice system. That is why, he says, he has written to Chief Justice Margaret Price Finley proposing an independent review of sentencing for firearms.
Now all of a sudden he got all kind of different problem, delays and all kind of thing. First of all, he was only sentenced, you know. Now he rallied back and he got all these different problems with the system. And he's saying that one appeal can't change it. What would be explained to the banker, Mr. Gaston Brown, Mr. Hitler Mustache, is that an appeal would have a massive effect. If successful, it's called precedent, sir. There would now be an example that this is how the thing goes. And you would be able to use that in the lower courts as a binding authority down there. All of this could be explained to you by attorneys who are much smarter than me. Bishop, you don't got to believe me in a nothing. Go ask somebody who you respect. And possibly if them tell you it makes sense, at that particular moment in time is when you're going to say, bye, okay? That don't make sense. That's fine. Let me earn it. Me no mind work for it. Let me work for it.
And other serious violence offenses, repeat offending, and the wider justice system. Former Caribbean Court of Justice President Adrian Saunders has been suggested to chair the committee, while Sir Dennis Byron and Justice Godfrey Smith are also prepared to assist. Prime Minister Brown argues there is no contradiction between protecting the courts from interference and requiring the justice system to account for its performance. In his words, judicial independence and institutional accountability are not opposing principles. He says the government seeks no control over the decision of any court, but does want a justice system that is lawful, proportionate, transparent, consistent, and effective in protecting the public. And Prime Minister Brown ends his response with perhaps his sharpest restatement of the original complaint, warning that pervasive lenient sentences without extenuating circumstances serve no useful purpose but undermine public safety and confidence in the judiciary. The Prime Minister is now inviting the Caribbean heads of judiciary to support the proposed independent review and help ensure it proceeds without delay.
What I would have suggested is if he had proposed an independent review without saying that he gonna deport judges, that's a walk. At that point, Mr. Hitler Mustache, you got me on your side. But when you're gonna start off with you're gonna deport the people and then if they don't say what I want, no. There is no way for me to avoid the Hitler Mustache when that's the rhythm. Yeah, good thing me take a little shave today. You barely go see me mustache. But you could see me beard up. The next, well, no, listen, we reach into the part of the show where you want to start to learn things. Still got island too. I'm ending with my goat. But this next part here is something that I have been learning about, which is called a shadow cabinet. And they have this in Caribbean jurisdictions. I was hoping to play that video. We're not going to get to that today, but we're going to look at it from a Singapore and a UK perspective. And we're going to start to learn what a shadow cabinet is. This is not anything that is going to be complicated. And if there is any complication, I will be there to break it down so that you could understand fully. But anyway, shadow cabinet explained.
At the start of this year, Singapore entered an unusual situation. Pritam Sim stepped aside from the role of leader of the opposition, leaving the position vacant for the first time since it was formally created. Almost immediately, a familiar question resurfaced. Do we really need a leader of opposition in parliament? On the surface, the question seems reasonable. Singapore functioned for decades without such role. Parliament met, laws were made, and the governance continued without disruption. But what does the position actually do? In Westminster parliaments, the role exists to anchor a parallel governing structure, the shadow cabinet. In the United
Okay, Westminster systems, and you better believe, having been colonized by the United Kingdom, we have a Westminster system. So this is now where we're going to get into the shadow cabinet and their role in the government. And this is anchored by the leader of the opposition. The leader of the opposition is not just, it's not just a role to get the highest paid money on the opposition bench and don't have no meetings of the Public Accounts Committee and don't have any meetings of the Boundaries Commission and all them kind of thing there, but to collect checks. That's not the role. There is a much deeper role behind the leader of the opposition. So we don't get into that.
Kingdom, the leader of the opposition appoints a full shadow cabinet that mirrors the government's ministers. These shadow ministers do not operate casually. They track bills line by line, follow decisions closely, and develop alternative policy positions that could be implemented if power changes hand. This is why the UK leaders of the opposition receive public funding, staff support, and formal recognition. These are not personal perks, they support a structural function. Another key difference lies in the agenda control. In the UK, the opposition...
So, in the UK, and I think what should happen in the islands as well, as you were saying, is that you are funded and there is a parallel shadow cabinet. So if there's a minister of education, minister of health, somebody is appointed on the opposite side to look at what this minister is doing, to see if it's effective, and also to come up with alternative policy prescriptions. So say the government wants to go ahead and they want to boost tourism, the shadow governor of tourism, the shadow minister of tourism might look at it, how they would develop tourism in a slightly different manner. And they would start to come up with their prescriptions for the people.
Opposition controls a set numbers of opposition days. On those days, the opposition decides what parliament debates, regardless of whether the government agrees with the topic. This
is also another way to get the opposition to work. There are opposition days in the UK. So you hear that? Even if you're the party in power, you got to come in a parliament and you got to debate according to what the opposition feel like is important. It's not just whoever in power get to determine how this thing gonna go. The opposition has an active role in the governance of the country. I find that very interesting.
Opposition institutional leverage. It allows scrutiny to be proactive rather than reactive. Now, compare that with Singapore. Singapore's leader of the opposition does not appoint shadow ministers. There's no formal shadow cabinet, no parallel policy team, and no guarantee policy research structure tied to opposition portfolios. Opposition MPs can and do question ministers, but scrutiny is fragmented and individual, not systematic. Agenda-setting power also differs fundamentally. In Singapore, the parliamentary agenda is determined by the leader of the House, a government appointment. The leader of the opposition has no power to introduce opposition-led debates or set parliamentary priorities. The role in Singapore comes with an office in the Parliament House, additional staff support, higher pay, and a priority in questioning during the sitting. But these features are largely symbolic, not structural.
When you look at the position in the Caribbean versus and Singapore, we're closer to Singapore than the UK, at least in the smaller islands. As I say, I know for certain Jamaica has a shadow cabinet. For certain, I would have to believe that Trinidad also has shadow cabinet. I am uncertain of if Barbuda has reached that level of sophistication. I did not check.
This leads to critical observation. The current leader of the opposition role in Singapore is more ceremonial than functional. It recognizes the presence of the opposition, but does not.
If you have a leader of the opposition who is not doing the bare minimum jobs, making sure that the Public Accounts Committee is activated, making sure that the Boundaries Commission is doing its reports, active during question time, pushing for more scrutiny of the government. I'm not saying cussing the government. I'm saying scrutinizing on behalf of the people. Then they would neuter themselves and they would make themselves largely symbolic. And you hear literally the same thing I said. They're just going to collect more money and they're going to get the office someone. That's it.
Embed opposition as governing institution within parliament. This distinction matters because dominant party system concentrate power by design. Without frequent checks, bills are examined from within their own framework. That does not mean laws are poorly written, but it does mean fewer incentives exist for systematic challenge, stress testing, and alternative policy reasoning. In Westminster system like UK, Australia, and Canada, opposition is not treated merely as competition. It is treated as part of governance architecture. Australia and Canada both operate.
Should we have a structure where the opposition, just like in those countries, in which case we have the same system, should the opposition members be treated as though they are part of the governance structure? And what would that look like? How could we get to the point where the party in power is not looking at the government as merely competition or merely over there to be symbolic, just to say that we have an opposition? Because you don't know when they say, do the eyes have it? Everybody gonna say aye. Never mind if they mash up the government a couple of months later, they're gonna say aye. Them kind of ways there.
The formal shadow cabinets. Opposition leaders receive public resources because scrutiny is understood as public good, not partisan indulgence. In Singapore, opposition remains largely reactive, responding to government initiatives rather than shaping parallel policy conversations. This is why debates about whether Singapore needs a leader of opposition often miss the deeper issue. The issue is whether Singapore intends to recognize opposition. A functional opposition does not weaken governance, it clarifies it. When ministers are questioned often, they have to explain their thinking clearly. When policies are examined in detail, problems that were not obvious at first can be spotted early. When there are different policy ideas on the table, laws become clearer and better tested. This matters even more in a dominant party system. In this setting, opposition MPs should not be seen as troublemakers, but as people doing the work of shadow policymakers. Competition in the parliament should not be treated as something dangerous. It should be seen as a way to keep power in check. Because in the end, the opposition is not fighting the country. The government is not fighting the people. Both sides are working within the same system for the same Singaporeans. So, the real question is no longer whether Singapore needs a leader of the opposition. The real question is whether Singapore one day wants a more complete Westminster system, one where opposition is not just present but properly empowered. And if Singapore ever chooses to move in that direction, one question becomes unavoidable. When do you think Singapore will be ready for its own shadow cabinet?
Okay. Well, I would ask those same questions with regards to the smaller islands. And I actually, if I was going to make a recommendation to a party, I would tell them without the government assistance, you should start to form a shadow cabinet. I think that it would be very useful to have that type of setup, because it would also mean that you're prepared to govern from day one. You're in tune with the issues. Anyway, it's time for the main event. We're gonna go to my guy, the GOAT, Honorable Mark Brownlee, and his appearance on the Island Team Morning Show. And I said so a couple of weeks ago, and I'm very happy. Some of the discussions that we have been having are breaking into the mainstream, so people starting to call in and ask about the Public Accounts Committee now, people, and there are so many other things that was one of the things that I tried to push on a small level, but there are other things. Boundaries Commission, for example, we need to get that going. We need to have the audit report laid in accordance with the law, which should be at the end of September, the latest. And there are a number of other things that need to happen in order for the people to be represented more equitably by the politicians. But anyway, let's go to the GOAT.
And we are back on Island T. It's just about 6 minutes after the hour of 9. And as promised, with us in studio, we have the Honorable Premier Mark Brantley. Good morning, Mr. Brantley, and welcome to our Island T show this morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
The pleasure is indeed ours. So, shall I dive right into it? So, I am going to ask an obvious question that has been circulating. When should a politician retire?
That's up to the politician and up to the people. I think in our system of participatory democracy, we have elections, and once elections are free and fair, then the shelf life of any politician is determined by the people.
Okay. So I'm gonna help I spot that trend. The Premier is not a fan of when I do this, by the way. But I want to help I spot that trend. Now, if you ask the Premier a question, you generally are gonna get two answers. The first answer is the answer to make you smile. The first answer is gonna be the answer to be like, no, me with I. So that's not the real answer, by the way. But, well, sometimes it's the real answer. But you want also hear another answer. You got to talk out the left side of the mouth and then out the right side of the mouth. And that answer that he gives, reasonable. The people gonna decide. The politician gonna decide. Let's see if we can maintain that trajectory.
Sometimes we, pontificate and say some people have been there too long, but if they go to the electorate and the electorate says, that's who I want, then that's the power of democracy. So I'm actually a proponent of term limits for the leader.
Okay.
We ain't take 30 seconds for there to be a change. So it depends on the people, it depends on the politician, but I believe in term limits. When asked this question a few years ago, he said that he believed in term limits in the federal parliament, but not in Nevis. Nevis is too small for that. When I heard him say so, it been remind me of when Jay-Z been sing Forever Young. Everybody wants to live forever.
But having said that, I'm also of the view that people should be given the opportunity to choose who they want. And so for me, the emphasis really should be to ensure that elections are free and fair.
Okay.
If elections are free and fair, then we have to abide by the results that we get.
So what about, you mentioned term limits. So how many terms? 2 terms, 3 terms?
I think 2 terms is reasonable.
Okay.
The truth is, I think that sometimes we have these conversations in a bit of a vacuum. And many people don't realize that development takes time. So you would see people say, for example, oh, you've been in there for 3 years, 4 years, I ain't seen a big project. But think about it. If you are coming into government, you have a manifesto. Most parties would put out a manifesto. You say, well, all right, I want to build a complex of some kind. You then have to have that done. You have to engineering, you have to do all of that. Most times, before you even can get to an approval stage on that project, it's probably 2 years gone. You then have to think about the financing of that project. That may be another year. So by the time you start construction, guess what? It's election time again.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes we need to appreciate that development doesn't happen overnight. And oftentimes I think our electorate, I like to say sometimes we're in an Instagram culture. People want everything right away.
Yeah.
That things don't happen overnight. If you're going to do housing, for example, housing takes time. You know, if you're going to do a hospital, if you're going to do a major school project, if you're something, it takes time. It has to be planned, it has to be implemented, it has to be financed. Under our procurement rules, you have to go out to bids and all of that. So 5-year term isn't.
When you hear these circumstances about the difficulties of capital projects, this is why I believe in my premier when it comes to doing road. My premier gonna get approval for a road quick, and he gonna be able to do it. But even housing is a major challenge, and some of the things that are described as issues seem like regular circumstances of. Let me just let this go.
As long as people think it is. So I think 2 terms could be reasonable, but if I were to be forced to choose, I would say leave it as it is and allow the people to make that decision as to who they want.
We know we have upcoming elections. I would say it's less than a year away. It's been touted that the waters are murky. I'm going to be bold and ask, what do you think is the chances of your big blue machine reigning in the next election as a victor?
Oh, I think that those chances are very good. Okay. We have in Nevis, there's a lot of chatter around. I mean, I listen to your program sometimes, and I know we have some big critics, even on this program. But I'll tell you that at the end of the day, every government has to run on its record. That's what it comes down to. Anybody seeking to get into government is running on promises. A government is running on its record. And I will measure the record of the CCM-led administration in Nevis against any, whether here nationally or even in our region, in terms of what we have seen. I was reflecting as I was on the boat coming over that our country is going through one of the worst periods of drought that we have seen perhaps in the last decade.
I want to correct something what the Premier said. Now, I am aware that there are circumstances where parties in Nevis win the most seats in Nevis. That has not always equal in a party in Nevis winning an election. My contention is on anybody. I'm willing to hear arguments in the opposite. But if you win 2 out of 3 seat, if you win 3 out of 3 seat, like the concerned citizens movement did in the last election, and you end up on the opposition benches, you have lost the election, sir. No, if you don't believe me, in 2010, and it would not have been 2010, it would have been 11 now, whenever Abby Patrice Nesbitt ended up on the government side. And happy win 1 seat and in government. Well, how you lose the election? Explain to me how you got 1 seat and you're in government and you ain't win the election. So from a federal standpoint, 1983, and happy win. I wouldn't even say they win 89. From when Labour get in, there was no winner. As a matter of fact, every time Labour has been in government, all Nevis political parties have lost the election until our political party form the government with Labour. Then we're gonna say that they win the election. But it's not correct to say that you win the election. In Nevis, the concerned citizen movement can't tell me that they win the election and they're in opposition. The maths ain't mathsing. When you win the election, you are a member of government. That's just how this thing works. So a win in Nevis does not equate to an overall victory. We are going to have to speed up the thing. You know.
Not one individual in Nevis has lost water. When I hear sometimes, even here in Bastille, the Prime Minister and others are saying that 70% of Kitchens now have 24/7 water, I smile. Because 100% of Nevis has had 24/7 water from time immemorial.
Time immemorial mean that if you go back in the history book, before there was knowledge of that country, that's when you got to go to who said that there was no water. So this is just something what he making up on the spot. This is building your legacy. I wish that he would have said that he was the individual who brought 100% water security rather than try to say that there has never been water problems in Nevis under any government. That don't. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to speed this thing here up a little bit. We need to get to the interesting.
Excluded from a coalition should anything hit the fan this election?
No, I'm not concerned at all. I think at the end of the day, my focus and the focus of my party that I'm privileged to lead at this point is to retain our seats in Nevis. We feel very confident.
Okay. Let me talk about this coalition thing. And let me, I gonna be honest with you, so that the premier ain't have to be. See, I got on me blue underneath, you have to go underneath me hat. Got on me blue, it's the same blue. So I gonna tell you what going on. One the reason why the concerned citizens movement is not afraid of being left out of any coalition is because there's nobody to partner with. Run a campaign with Pam, forgot about Pam. So Pam is not excited to join up with the big blue machine. Cause PLP every chance they get. Can't go nowhere with him. And because of how Denzel Douglas has been spoken about in the past by the premier, ain't no way if Dougie got a say that there will be any joining with the concerned citizen movement. Somebody actually brought it to me and said, if there comes a situation in St. Kitts where there is no clear majority, Labour might be quicker to join up with another party in syncets to get back into government than to go with the concerned citizen movement. That is the level of how bad things are. I think that at this particular moment in time, the only coalition partner for syncets parties, and I could be wrong, is the Nevis Reformation Party. I could be wrong. This is just how I see it. I feel like CCM has burned all the other bridges, and so there is no need to fear anything because there will be no shot. If you're voting for the concerned citizen movement in federal election, you're voting for them to be in opposition, in my estimation. Could be wrong. But that's how I looking at the situation right now. Anyway, I'm gonna speed this thing all the way up. I'm gonna go to where I need to go to. Public Accounts Committee question.
Timing. This is the issue because we got a formal proposal somewhere around, I believe it was August of 2025, if memory serves. This town hall that this gentleman is referring to was prior to that. So clearly, once we got the proposal, we had a number of engagements in Nevis on it. In fact, it's been the most consultation that any government has ever done on any project, and that was done in.
There were 2 consultations, and that is the most consultation that any government has done on any project. 2. We were promised more. And it's not just by the government. Jansen's also said that he gonna get his team on the ground, and we're gonna be hearing more from him. So he would be speaking to other radio stations, other networks, and all this kind of thing, and really getting out there. And we have not heard the answers beside a couple of Facebook posts.
In Nevis, we met with the church, we met with the young people, the schools, the 6 farmers, we met with the police, we met with the opposition. We sat with the elected opposition.
Okay. I see how he inflate the number. I was thinking he mean public consultation, but he talking about when he take up the 6 farmers and them, and that's a consultation, for example. When he take up the teachers, and that's a consultation, etc., etc., etc. So in those circumstances, sure, most consultations ever. They were 65.
In the cabinet room and shared the details of the project with the elected opposition. We met with, as I said, the security forces, church, chamber of commerce, bankers association, contractors, all the stakeholders, and then we had another general meeting in Nevis. I think we total about 9.
Interesting to note that the landowners are not part of these stakeholders. All these different factions, but not the persons who own land in the area. Anyway, we come into the PAC question.
10 public engagements that we had on this particular project. So we've had conversations about it. I think what people have been trying to try to suggest that there's some subterfuge, and I think that is unfortunate because I have not survived this long in politics engaging in subterfuge. For me, it makes no sense. If you engage in public business, you have to be willing and able to go and face the public. But let us say, for example, that you and I are sitting here, and you said, boy, I have an idea for a poultry farm, It would be responsible of me to then go on my show or go on my press conference to talk about Biff Mills and his poultry farm, when Biff has not even presented a proposal to the government. And that was the only point that I was making. Okay. Once the proposal came, we engaged with the public.
Okay. Caller, go ahead for the Premier. You're live on Island T. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Mr. Brantley, good morning, Mr. Brantley.
Good morning to you.
I would suggest that the personal chemistry between the Premier and any sitting Premier and any sitting Prime Minister, our relationship that between St. Kitts and Nevis should not depend on that. And so things like that need to be formed up. And giving the impression that, well, your style now seems to have rewards in geothermal makes people feel as if it's transactional. But the main thing I would ask you about is your role as opposition leader. Just as you can't change the laws or how you govern depend on the laws, you can't just change the role of the opposition leader. And I would ask, for instance, why have you not been more strident in making sure that the Public Accounts Committee, which is fundamental in a parliamentary democracy, is not activated, fully operationalized? Because you see, Mr. Brantley, we had that discussion already, and I was very surprised at your response that since independence, it has never worked. And is that a reason for it not to be made functional? So that's the question. That's the thing. That's I think what makes people kind of suspicious or apprehensive about how you perform the role of opposition leader, because they are supposed to keep any sitting government accountable. That, I think, is the prime role of an opposition leader.
So, if I can respond, caller, you said something about chemistry. Even husband and wife need chemistry to stay together. You can't have relationships absent chemistry. There has to be a relationship that is based on some level of trust, some level of communication, and frankly, some level of mutual respect. If you don't have that, then any relationship collapses. That's the first point I'll make. Second point.
Then why then go to length to say that the relationships should be formed up, like in terms of fair share?
No, but the two are not the two are not mutually exclusive. The two are not mutually exclusive. If you have people who resent each other, who are disrespectful to each other, then whatever the forming up of the relationship may mean in terms of saying fair share and this is a percentage and all that, you will have acrimony. That's the simple point I'm making. So the two things go hand in hand. You can firm up the framework while also trying to cultivate a respectful relationship.
Isn't it? I've been trying to break through to the premier so that he could understand the same level of respect that you're showing to Dr. Joe. People are seeing it as like you're just being transactional. He's your friend because you could get something out of it. You need him. Because the same respect that the premier speaks about, if he had been showing this type of respect to Janice Daniel Hodge, there would not currently be a lawsuit. Not for this. So it can be when you are gonna be respectful on one end, people are gonna see that you are not doing the same thing on the other end, and they're gonna think that you are disingenuous and lie and a louse. That's what it's gonna appear to the people. Like you can't just be cool and calm when it comes to joining Janice's hellboy. You get me?
Dr. Drew is not my friend. I don't go to Dr. Drew's house for dinner. He doesn't come to mine. But I just feel that at a level, I'm the Premier of Nevis, he is the Prime Minister, I'm the leader of the opposition nationally, we should be able to engage. It's as simple as that. I don't understand.
If you had these things formed up before, it would not have waited so long, for instance, because the federal government would have had to, by law or arrangement, to contribute to geothermal and whatever else. Don't wait until you get.
I hear that. I hear
yeah.
that, and we can debate all day what could have and what should have happened, but we are where we are. And so, for me, there's very little value in saying that this should have been done and that should have been done. The question is, what are we now doing? Now, to speak to the other matters about.
If you look at, as I did, because I went back and I looked at the original debate on the Public Accounts Committee and the new act in 2017, a large part of the premier's argument at that time was what should have been done and how things would have been better, etc., etc. But he has evolved now. There is no value in that.
About the leader of the opposition. You mentioned, yes, but you mentioned something about stridency, and it gets back. That's the word you use. But in St. Neve's local parlance, stridency really means cussing. You got to cuss somebody. That's the view that we have. You got to come out there. Wait, let me finish. You got to come out there and lambaste somebody because that's what oppositions do. In some of the parliaments around the region, the fellas look like they even want to fight. That's how we are accustomed to it happening. And I know it well because I had a stint as leader of the opposition, and I used to go after Dr. Douglas as prime minister in an aggressive way. So I understand that. I'm simply saying that there is also room for constructive opposition that is not just opposing but also offering alternatives. And that is what I have tried to do, if anybody has been fair enough to have actually been listening.
I think one question that should be asked of the premier. Oh, obviously, I'm not going to be the man to get to ask this. But I think that beyond the offering alternatives, somebody need to ask him to list like some of the ways he has scrutinized, not be strident, no use all of them word there. I need you to use this exact word. Ask him to demonstrate ways that he has scrutinized the government on behalf of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and watch him have nothing for you.
Position now, though.
Oh, I don't know about any convenient position. I'm telling you what my position is. Whether it's convenient or not, that is for you. That's for the pundits.
No, it's
right?
convenient for you.
No, but I am telling you, you're the one who's putting a label on it. You said geothermal is transactional. You're saying getting cheaper power for WinFM, getting cheaper power for the single mother in St. Paul's is transactional.
As a result of your...
Well, I am saying, caller, that as a result... no. I'm saying that as a result of developing good relations, it's like me saying I have great relations, St. Kitts and Nevis with Taiwan, and as a result of that good relations, we get 40 scholarships. That doesn't mean it's transactional. That's saying that with good relationships, you can get progress. That's what I'm saying.
If it's a change,
we have to end the caller.
Caller,
we have to give other callers an opportunity, please. Thank you very much.
Can you answer the thing about the public account?
Caller, you.
With regards to the party scholarships, we didn't get to listen to the entire interview. But there was a point in time when he was saying that he was in St. Kitts on Saturday, and 40 scholarships were given to persons in the Federation, and out of the 40, Nevisians received 5% of them. And he's holding out hope that because of his ass kissing of Dr. Joe, that next time it's gonna be 3 out of 40, and we will be able to say that we have progress. There was an issue in what he was saying as well, because he was saying that it should be based on capabilities, which is a meritocracy. What I would propose is that there should be a clear criteria for how these things are given out. And if the criteria happen to fall in the Nevis favor and Nevis got 20 people who are qualified, then let it be 20 RB. If it happen to be 35 or 40 RB qualified, let it be. So I don't think that that's going to be the case. But there should be a criteria, an objective criteria, not a subjective criteria that everybody can understand. This is the basis upon which the scholarships are awarded, and that would make it a true meritocracy, rather than just splitting it down the middle, saying that it is based off pro rata proportion, whatever it is. Whoever earned it should be given the opportunity. At least that's the alternative. I would suggest.
Well, I've asked me that before, and I find that it's a little odd. I think I know who you are, and it's a little odd that you put the Public Accounts Committee, wrap it around my neck, and say that you're suspicious of me, as if I've been the first leader of the opposition in this country. Singapore's got independence in 1983. I believe, if that's correct, I would have been 4 years old at the time. Not 4, what am I saying? I would have been 14 years old. Forgive me, I'm trying to take away some of my age. So I would have been a boy. We've had leaders of the opposition, we've had parliament functioning. The point that I was trying to make to you then, and I'll try to make to you now, holding up the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, as some holy grail of opposition propriety is nonsense. It's nonsense because the country has functioned for the last 43 years this year without any such PAC having ever been constituted.
And here is where there is a contradiction again. Earlier, he said that we should not be engaged in talking about what should be and what would be and all that kind of thing here. And here we have a long story coming out.
Now, that is not to suggest that it's not a good idea or having one when it might not be helpful. But to hold that up and to say, look, Mark Brantley, you're a bad leader of the opposition because you have not initiated the PAC. Well, that to my mind is a very convenient argument that you're now advancing. So that is my concern about your argument, because I never heard that argument when Dr. Douglas was leader of the opposition. I didn't hear that argument when whoever else has been there over the years has been leader of the opposition. You seem to have it as a litmus test for Mark Brantley's effectiveness as leader of the opposition, and I say nonsense on that.
So what is the solution with respect to the PAC as of now?
No, I think the Public Accounts Committee ought to be instituted. I wouldn't shy away from that, but I'm simply saying that using it as if it's the only.
I just realized that I was muted. Um, what I was saying is that in the UK, the Public Accounts Committee does not have legislation, and yet from since the 1800s, they have been able to function without having any primary legislation. The argument that no parliament, no leader of the opposition, nobody has ever enforced it, and everything has been okay. My question would be, how much better would we be if there was actual scrutiny of the government side and how they are spending money? Because the PAC is not allowed to criticize, it is not there to tell the government how to spend money, you know. It is there to evaluate and make sure that the people's money is spent in the most effective and efficient way. So my thing is a definite need for the implementation of the PAC. This is only one of the ways that the leader of the opposition has been failing his duties for the Constituency Boundaries Commission. And I had to use that one there because he told me personally in a back and forth that he has never broken the law. And I said, when last was the Constituency Boundaries Commission, when last they do a report? And he said, okay, Alan, you got me.
Only litmus test as to the efficacy of the leader of the opposition is
so
simply
whose
wrong.
job is it to put it in place?
Okay. So it would be the leader of the opposition who would have to, activate that process to get the.
And he has been in India now for nearly a full term, and there has been no activation. One thing that my goat is not short of is excuses for why he cannot do his job. He will give you a whole rundown of not done it before and this and that, and yet still he will not endeavor to try to be the first one, to try to set an example, and to try to make sure that there is a proper scrutiny of government finances. And here is where I've been trying to tell people, I'm not trying to get the Public Accounts Committee in place to scrutinize the government in news. That's not the goal. The goal is to get the federal government scrutinized, because the Public Accounts Committee would be able to look into certain things like the fair share and start to get us to more equity with regards to what we're doing, to look at if there is any mismanagement of finance, and to look at where they are being applied. So the goal has not simply been to put the premier under pressure. The goal has been understanding that this is something that will apply federally and locally. Anyway, we're going over time, but we soon finish.
Set up and to get the PAC going. So absolutely. So I take responsibility for that because I'm now in a position. I just take some umbrage at the suggestion that somehow it falls to me and only me, and
I understand.
from time.
This is the same thing as what I said earlier. If you're gonna apologize, or if you're gonna take responsibility, and then you're gonna say but everything before the but, you not really mean it. And this is why I have been telling people, these are the questions that need to be asked in order for there to be accountability. I was challenged by Gaston to show how the current system that we have can actually bring about some accountability, and that is why I started to do this particular research, and this is why I'm trying to tell people, please, let's get these things going so that the people can be represented in a more equitable fashion.
I mean, memorial, it's only been me.
So how soon can the public expect that you'll start working and putting it in place?
I'm really not sure on that. I can't make a commitment. I think that's something we'll have to discuss internally to determine what we do. We have the framework that's there, but as I said,
Connor, we're going to get to you, okay?
It.
All right, Connor, good morning. You're live on Island T. Go ahead for the premiere.
Yes, good morning to everybody.
Good morning.
And greetings once more in Jesus Christ's name, the only Savior of sinners from their sins and from hell. Now, first of all, I would like to say that unless we do things the Bible read.
So the answer from the premier is let me explain. All he's trying to say is that there is really no plan to put the pack in place. He is not interested in doing his job. He is interested in making sure that the $7,500 a month is in his bank account. And that's it. And he's hoping that the people of Nevis vote and give them 3 seats once again so that he can maintain the position of leader of the opposition and maintain $7,500 a month from the federal coffers. That is it, and that is all for tonight. Tune in to the guys tomorrow and Friday. We still got 2 more Mondays this month. So I will be back with you guys later. Next week. And we shall see how it goes. Hope everybody stay safe. I hope SKN get some rain. Take care of yourself, and if you can, take care of somebody else too.
On the stream tonight, quality time. Quality time, quality time. Every Monday, on the line. I'll bring it facts tonight. Break, keep the future bright. Come and share, subscribe tonight. Real entertainment, network worldwide. Quality time. Quality time. Every Monday night, babe. Quality time. Quality time. Quality time. Quality time. Quality time. Quality time. Every Monday, on the line, on the line. I'll bring the facts tonight, facts tonight. So the people read between the lines. Rent life, rent life. Everybody tune in live, tune in live. Global topics, deep analysis, audience interaction every night. I'll on the live stream sharp, breaking down the news and the world affairs part. From the islands to the White House, every headline get dissected right now. No noise, no gimme talk. Pure facts when I start walk. Economics, politics, to Caribbean lens on the global view. Shut a light up, non-stop. Viewers calling, comments drop. Everybody got a voice tonight. Reasoning deep till the morning light. We not follow every trend. We are search the truth again. Real analytics, no pretend. Quality time set the standard again. Quality time every Monday night. I'll keep the people minds ignite. Live reactions, facts inside. Friend, keep the conversation bright. Quality time every Monday night. From the Caribbean to worldwide. Come and share, interact live. Everybody on the stream tonight. I'm talking war and trade. I'll break it down so the truth get displayed. Stock market rise and fall. How it really affect the small